Howdy howdy, welcome back to the swamp. Today we're going through the grab and drag spore germination, spore isolation technique. I got it and it was popularized by Ed Grand a few years ago. It's really good for just germination of some difficult spores, dirty spores, but I've been using it more for low-tech spore germination or spore isolation. So these are some phoenix oysters, spores on a petri dish. And so what you have to do, either if you don't already have a spore swab, if you have a pre-spored swab, that's perfect. But I've got some phoenix oysters here, so I'm just scooping some swabs off the plate. I'm not really going to be able to see them on the swab, but that's you just need a few, especially if you're trying to do an isolation. But this is a very effective and efficient way to germinate spores. I've also found if you have a spore print, you can use just a few, and you can even just take one little petal, grab one little tuft of cotton off of this with a sterile set of tweezers, and then put the swab away. Technically, you can only just use the one. So you see here, I'm kind of struggling a little bit. You can use a sterile blade and cut small little petals, little slices in the cotton, and that allows you to just pull some tufts a little bit easier. But I kind of like not cutting it, because then I get some longer, kind of weirder strands that just dangle a little bit more in the agar. So you can see, you can do an S pattern. You can do what I'm doing here, which is just a bunch of horizontal parallel lines with just enough space between them. And you can use one little tuft and do a bunch of plates. Again, depending on the species, depending on how many spores are present, and how well that species and those spores germinate, storage, where they came from, etc., as well as your media, there can be some variation. But you can see I'm literally just taking the cotton swab and rubbing it through the agar. And so you want to puncture through and go towards like the base of the plate. You want to get like a trench, go into the agar, and then you're just dragging that little cotton tuft with spores through the agar. And doing that is going to create a little friction, so it's going to pull off little sections. I didn't drop it, you didn't see that. And so you're going to pull off little sections of cotton that just kind of get lost behind, and as it's rummaging through the agar, little spores are going to just pop off, right? So sterile tweezers between each. Make sure you cool those tweezers off. I just let them cool, sit for a minute, and then I'll dunk it in the agar just to help cool it down. And so you can see there's still plenty of cotton here after doing a handful of plates. And so I'll go back, grab another chunk, and we can do another handful of plates. And so depending on how many plates you want to do, how for sure you want maybe monos, you can use more or less cotton and more or less plates per. So as I'm going through these plates, I'm like diluting the spores a bit here, and like I'm losing little bits of cotton and things as I'm going through. So if I were to use even just one full cotton swab and use a whole bunch of plates, as long as the media doesn't kind of congeal all over it, the more I'm going through some of these plates, I'm also kind of helping dilute it. So the later plates should get some lower germinations, which will help me for sure be able to get some monokaryons, which are single spores. So on most spores, most mushrooms, or all mushrooms, come from two spores. And so what I'm doing here helps to be able to get early signs of early germination and pluck away possible single spores that you can use for breeding. It is also a great technique because it keeps things clean, it keeps things separated, and so for those reasons of being used well for dirty cultures is how it's also beneficial to kind of help isolate those spores. This last one, I'm just going to use the rest of this little bit of the cotton swab just because I do want a full multi-spore phoenix oyster option, just see what it offers. So don't mind that, that's not a grab and drag, but I had to put it on there. But see, now we're going to have to wait. While we wait, we'll do another stack. We'll run through it. That way you guys can see it again. So again, just taking these little clean, sterile set of tweezers, cotton swab. This one is a chocolate oyster. It doesn't look like anything's on there, but there's some chocolate oyster spores. And so again, you don't want the whole swab. just a little bit, and depending on what you're doing, you can use more or less depending on how special those spores are. If you only want to use a little bit and save the rest for later, use a small tuft, tuck that cotton swab away, and it's still sterile. And so you can see I'm going through, leaving enough room between each line so that way as things start to germinate, I can clearly see from that little trench, from those little lines, where the spores are germinating from, and I'm able to pluck them before they're all connected, versus just rubbing the full cotton swab all over the surface. You're smearing things everywhere, so spores are going to germinate right next to each other. And this grab and drag is the easiest, probably the lowest tech way of isolating single spores. And so right there, I just lost a little bit of cotton left on my tweezers, and sometimes the agar will just pull it off, and that's fine. I'll probably get a couple more spores germinating right there. I'll just keep that in mind, but cool the tweezers after they're sterile, and we'll get back into it. And so I did a serial dilution recently with some different with some Hericium spores, and it was the June cut lion's mane. I've been posting about it a little bit on Instagram, as well as all about the monos and the breeding on Patreon, and some deep dives into what I'm doing in each steps of the process. But I wanted to be able to share this here, just because I think it's also just a really good low-tech way to be able to germinate spores, tricky spores, because you're also submerging those spores in the agar rather than some of the just casual cotton swabs over the top. You're able to kind of shove those spores and the cotton into the agar, so then it's surrounded by a better moisture environment. Moisture isn't really a word, but you know what I'm saying. And so it just helps with some of the germination of some difficult spores. And depending on what you're doing and how it's going, you can see it gets a little wonky here and there, and like kind of gets into some weird positions. And so you can use a sterile tool, push it back into a nice, the swab itself into a nice spot. I just work it around, and I let that kind of guide some of the germination rates and things. If I really wanted full germination of every possible spore, I'd make sure that full cotton swab, or tuft of the cotton swab, is underneath the agar the entire time. But I'm kind of just trying to I've got a bunch of these Phoenix oyster spores, so I'm just trying to get a few monos. I'm not too worried about this is the chocolate oyster. And so both of these, I'm not too worried about the multi-spore. I just kind of want to be able to isolate the spores, pull some monos, and then be able to use them for breeding. And I'll show you the plates here in a minute. Once I get through these, I'll show you the plates of the Virginia lion's mane that I've just pulled some possible monos off of, using this exact same technique. I've still got to check them under the microscope, but I'll show you what I'm working with and what I'm seeing. So let's just finish this swab off, grab a little bit of cotton from here and there on some of the edges, and just build up a little cotton so it can kind of fall off loosely and see what it does. So there's, like anything in mushrooms, there's a bunch of ways to do this. You don't have to follow exactly my technique. Just kind of see what I'm doing, understand how, why, and then use whatever tools, use whatever cotton device, whatever, in your own environment. You know, everybody does things differently. But I personally think this is one of the best ways to even just germinate spores. You're dunking them in the agar, they're going to germinate. If there's any contaminants, a lot of times they'll get thrown off into one of the little trenches, not every single trench that you run through. So it kind of helps keep those contaminants isolated, as well as the spores. So that germination rate, low tech, why wouldn't you do this? You can save even more spores, but now we've got all of these, a bunch of them, we're waiting. So we're gonna keep an eye on these little trenches on every single plate. I'll check them probably starting in like 2-3 days. These are oyster spores, so I expect them to be a little faster than the lion's mane, but they'll start looking a little bit like stuff like this. So not everything is going to germinate depending on how many spores you use and how many spores are on the swab and such, which I'm just trying to isolate for breeding. And so you can see all these individual little colonies, little sections of growth, and not every single one of them is going to be a single spore, and the single spore is what is a monokaryon, just half the genetic DNA needed to produce mushrooms, but they can still fully myceliate. So I'm looking for them to just start to isolate and come out. So this plate's got a couple good ones, but I've already got a whole stack. I went through, you can see on my little spots that I went through already, and grabbed some different monos. But you want to look for after the grab and drag, you want to look for just that early bits of germination. And so a bunch of these are too far already. They're already touching, they're already into a different trench where there's probably some more spores waiting that maybe have or haven't germinated. So you want to get them at that really early stage and just pull little like rice kernels, little small pieces away from any other germinations off. And I've got more about that on my Patreon. But again, I just wanted to be able to share this technique here. Again, popularized by Agar. That's where I learned it. And it's just a great low-tech way to germinate single spores for breeding, or just get great germination rates for some trouble, difficult, or dirty spores using cotton swab, some tweezers, right? I use that brand. You use whatever cotton swabs, as long as they're sterile. Tweezers, pluck them off, run them through the agar. If it's difficult and you want to savor it a little bit better and neater, you can use a little blade and cut little petals, and then do the same grab and drag technique. So whatever floats your boat, whatever works for you. If you want more, join us, like this, subscribe, join the swamp, check out my website. I've got all sorts of different information, links, resources, cultures. I'm posting on here, on Instagram, creating communities on Patreon, Discord, whatever it is, I've got it for you. So check us out, keep supporting the swamp, stay tuned for the next one.